There you are. I told you I'd find him. It's a mother's instinct.
Instinct? He left us a note. I'm leaving. I'll be at the train station.
I'm going to Robot City. I'll make you proud.
There comes a time in a young person's life when he must show everyone what he's really made of.
Put your head between your legs.
Huh?
Hello and welcome to episode 17 of We'll Review It Our Shelves, the podcast where we review the movies on our shelves. Every 2 weeks we'll take a randomly selected movie from our collection and we'll review it ourselves. I'm Brian Morgan and joining me, as always,
is Dan Bergman.
Yay!
And those much
I don't know why I do that. I always do that. I'll have to stop that.
No, I appreciate it. You're probably the only person in the world who cheers for me.
I will continue to say yay then. Episode 17... we are discussing the 2005 movie Robots. I don't know if you want to call it an animated classic. I know some of the marketing material was instant classic.
They say that about a lot of movies, but I think that's the same as, like, every mother going, it's like, my baby's special.
And like in The Incredibles, when everyone's special, no one is special.
I like it.
Which also an animated movie. This movie was not Disney Pixar. I think this is the first non-Disney related animated movie that we've covered.
I believe so. Yeah, we've done 2 Pixar films, and I think that's it. I think that's the only animated movies we've talked about.
Yeah, this one was put out by the same people that put out Ice Age, which wasn't too bad.
Refresh me, this isn't DreamWorks, is it? Or is this...
This is put out by 20th Century Fox Animation.
So we've got ourselves I don't want to say independent, but definitely something unique among our collection so far.
It's definitely not something you see a whole lot of. I don't know how much animation they actually did, but this was not too bad. So last episode, we changed our format just a little bit, and we were talking about doing our listener feedback. From our episode on The Ghost in the Darkness, we did receive a little bit of feedback on the Podbean page. And it was from user Jeff S., who said that he is going to start referring to us as the Ghost and the Darkness. I did respond to that feedback by saying, which one's which?
Oh, no.
I do have a theory about which one should be which.
Please do share that with me.
Oh, you're definitely the Darkness. Sorry.
Okay. No, I accept that. I mean, both are acceptable.
Yeah, but thanks for that listener feedback, user Jeff S.
All right. Well,
And on to 2005 Robots. Dan, how'd this movie get on your shelf?
actually, I don't own this one. This one has no space on my shelf as of yet.
Oh, okay.
So this was, I believe this is probably I think we went through the second one that I didn't own. I utilized the Amazon rental feature on the Amazon streaming, which worked out pretty well for me.
Nice. You know, I will say, again, I know we do this every time, so if I'm boring the listeners with repeating this the same time, the streaming is convenient at times, and I really do care for that. Again, we're doing this of movies that either one of us own, but it's nice to have the availability of a streaming resource in case you don't own it.
Absolutely. So, but yeah, like I said, I'm not saying it's a bad movie, but it didn't stand out at the time or any... Obviously, in the past, didn't really stand out as something that I really wanted to own, or something that I would watch over and over again, like the rest of my collection. So, yeah, just never found a place.
I'm not sure when we got this movie. I think it was shortly after it came out. We have it on DVD, not Blu-ray, so it's been out for some time. And we picked it up because 2005, the kids were at the right age to want to watch animated movies. It wasn't terrible, so we picked it up so that, the kids might watch it and that sort of thing. And I don't remember the last time I watched it, but I remember going to see it in the theater because I thought, I like computer animation. And we thought we would pick it up. So that's the short version. Actually, that's an incredibly long version of how it got onto my shelf, which could have just been, I don't know, we saw it at the store and bought it.
It was on sale at the Walmart.
Yeah, we did go see it. Like I said, we did see it at the theater. We had that going for us. It was at the time where we could take both kids to the movie instead of having an infant at home. There was a period of time where we had to swap off going to the movies. Like, I would go see the movie, and then I would come home and tag Christy in, and she would go see the movie. Mm-hmm. And we would sort of swap who got to go see the movie first. We saw a lot of movies in the early 2000s that way, because it was convenient.
Interesting. It worked. You made it work.
Well, that way we didn't have to find a babysitter.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how it got onto my shelf, and that's my history with the movie, if you will. And I guess we could just move on to talking about the movie.
Yeah.
This movie is not bad. I like the message behind it. The see a need, fill a need, or see a problem, fix a problem. Which, I'll be honest, they don't actually say that in the movie, and for some strange reason, I thought that was the catch line all the way through, was see a problem, fix a problem. And it's not.
No.
Functionally the same idea, but, well, actually they're not functionally, because seeing a need and filling a need is just a little bit different from seeing a problem and fixing a problem. But I like both ideas, so I think that's why I latched on to the incorrect version. I know that most computer animated movies are geared towards kids. There were a lot of good adult jokes in this, and I'll talk about that a little bit more.
Oh, yeah.
But, one of the things that these movies all have is a very heavily implied moral. I think it's a great theme, and it encourages creativity and tries to get kids to think outside of the box and do something a little bit different. That was my first impression of the movie when I saw it and when I rewatched it, because I knew I was getting into that. So, what's your take?
That's definitely one way to look at it. It's not the way I looked at it, but it's definitely the one way to look at it.
Well, how did you look at it?
Well, when I first saw it, it was a cute movie. I wasn't as aware and as enlightened as I was back then, so I watched it, I was entertained, I laughed at the right parts, and we went home and said, well, that was cool, and then promptly forgot about it. Well, not completely. If somebody said, hey, remember Robots? I'm like, yeah, I vaguely remember that movie. Had Robin Williams in it, and Mel Brooks.
Well, that goes back to when this came up on the Random Movie Generator last episode, was I couldn't remember that Robin Williams was in it. And then when I saw it, I'm like, oh, God, how could I forget Robin Williams was in this?
Yeah, he was kind of the one that stood out. Him and Mel Brooks. There was actually quite a cast of names in there.
There were a large number of voice talents that I did not realize were in there.
Paul Giamatti and Drew Carey, just off the top of my head.
Yeah, Terry Bradshaw's in this.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Yeah, go figure. He must have really needed money.
Well, he gets paid, so there's that.
So kind of going back to what I took from this movie, to explain that, I have to talk about a different genre and a different title. Out of gamers out there, most people, I think in the general public, will probably remember the game Wolfenstein Yeah, first-person shooter, one of the pioneers and everything, and basically it was World War II themed with a little bit of a supernatural twist to it or whatever, but basically World War II, you were fighting Nazis, and everybody was cool with that.
Oofwaffa.
Yeah, everybody was cool with fighting Nazis. Nazis were the go-to bad guys for almost anything. I mean, from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Well, it's really hard to make a sympathetic Nazi.
Very true. Very difficult, unless you're Steven Spielberg, in which case, you know, in Schindler's List, you did make a few of them very sympathetic as people who were just stuck in a really hard situation and it's do or die type of thing. But we'll get to that if we ever review that one. My point being is that Nazis were the go-to guy. There was no question about it. Wolfenstein in this day and age, and I think most people are aware of the general atmosphere that we're without really having to spell it out, suddenly fighting Nazis became a political no-no. Why is
I disagree with that.
Well, really, because the advertisement for Wolfenstein came out and says, yeah, let's go kick some Nazi butt or whatever, and there was a bunch of people who were outraged and saying, why are you turning this political? Why are you doing this?
But I think that was a very vocal minority.
True.
And if you look at the Call of Duty game, is going back to World War II.
Yes.
And they're fighting Nazis. The Wolfenstein... The New Order? I think there's another Wolfenstein game coming out.
That's the game I'm talking about. That's the ad campaign where they said kick some Nazi butt or something to that effect. I'm not a huge fan, so that's why I can't remember the ad verbatim and everything. It's just the secondhand articles that I read about the quote-unquote outrage. And like you said, yeah, it's from a minority. And in all the scale of everything else, it really doesn't mean anything. But the fact that it exists is what is shocking to me. So that being said... This second watching, the more recent watching, and preparing for this podcast, so watching this, I see this movie, and it's the little guy, i.e. the rest of us, the 98% or the 99% of us, fighting the 1%ers who would like to see everyone else who can't afford the upgrades just go away. You know, and kind of a...
Stop getting in the way of my world.
Exactly. You know, it's like, I want to turn a profit. I don't care who suffers because of it. You know, it's like the corporate greed, the screw the little guy or the rest of the population as long as I get mine type of thing. And if they showed this movie today, I would kind of sense that there would be, again, a minority, but a very vocal one, who would try to say, hey, boycott this movie because it's dumping on rich people, or, you know, spewing, it's race baiting, you know, it's whatever weird kind of thought process would come from that crowd. I can picture it coming into this crowd because it definitely has a message of the little guy fighting the big one. And in this case, again, it might seem a stretch, but for their very survival.
In this particular movie, yes, they are fighting for their very survival. I don't usually refer to other podcasts on this podcast, but I will say something in reference to a podcast that I listen to. I'm a very avid fan of the Thomas Jefferson Hour. And in one of the most recent episodes of that podcast, the discussion turned to dissent and protest. And because that's a current topic, and they try to keep it reasonably topical as well as touching the historical aspects of it. And one of the things that was said in that episode was the very act of protesting is a patriotic thing. So some people are just being patriotic when they protest, or they protest something that even it's a small minority. But the crux of this movie could be said to be what a significant number of people, enough to shift the Electoral College, were voting for, which is to get rid of the empowered establishment and reestablish the world how it should be, as opposed to enabling the corruption and the self-serving nature of, in this particular instance, a corporation, but yeah, without really putting too fine of a point on it, the very fact that we're in the position that we're in is an act of rebellion in and of itself, because people are tired of the establishment.
Okay.
So in this movie, you have Big Weld, the corporation, and Ratchet in charge. He's turning the company into profit-mongering corporate greed. It's the stereotype, the same thing we want, or the same thing, rather, that we were talking about earlier. But they seem to be the people in charge of the city, because there didn't seem to be any structured governmental processes in place. There was just sweepers, and they were run by Ratchet's mom. and there was the corporation. Again, I don't need to go into the world and find out if there were police officers or anything like that, but the little people, the unheard masses, rose up to cast off their corporate overlords, or to, and I'll use the phrase, drain the swamp, if you will, of the people that were in power, so they could put their guy back in place.
Yeah, it's kind of what I saw. I mean, it was just basically, it was just it was very lighthearted and gentle way of advocating revolution, in a sense.
In a sense, but and I know going to the Thomas Jefferson Hour and discussing that and sort of skirting the issue, because I'm really trying to avoid the politics piece, but the people that voted for Trump, and I'm not talking about all of them, I'm very much generalizing, but a lot of them felt like they were not being heard by the establishment. So they voted for Trump to get somebody in there who would shake up the establishment. Whether that happens or not is completely irrelevant. Their intention was, I don't want to see a career politician in office who will do the same things that have been done for decades. I want somebody different, somebody who's going to shake things up. Now, I will say that and again, and I want to keep this political piece tiny, so I'm just going to wrap up with this. I will say that if you look at the good that could come out of the Trump presidency, it has definitely shaken up the establishment and put things, sort of tilted things on their ear, and you can look at that in a good light and say, wow, we can really come out of this and find out what is really the most important thing to us, or what are the most important things to us. And in this particular case, in the movie, it's about going back to when Big Weld was great. You're making Big Weld great again by putting Mel Brooks back in place, so you can actually have a corporation that listens to and empowers the little guy. It's corporate greed versus politics, but the two are motivated by the same things. So,
okay,
if we're going to talk about one, then you can kind of look at the other as a parallel, if you will. They both, greed is greed, corruption is corruption. It doesn't matter where it happens. It's just some have a different framework.
Okay, well, I gotta say, your desire to keep the political portion of this tiny by stating the one good thing out of the present administration, your wish comes true, because that's just about the only good thing that I think anybody could say about it. That being said,
you're not traveling in the same circles I am, because there are plenty of people saying good things.
Yeah, well,
that's neither here nor there.
But
let's move on.
You say,
let's get back to the movie.
You're saying that corporate greed and politics being two different things. Yeah, unfortunately, it's like I see those two things kind of going hand in hand. The unholy union that you just happen to see all the time. Because for corporate greed to thrive, it needs to cultivate a political arena that would allow its actions to be free to do what it will. If you have a political system that values the environment, then a lot of, say, like the oil companies wouldn't be able to do what they're able to do. They need somebody in politics to say, oh, we'll global warming, it's a hoax. We don't worry about that, because if you don't have that atmosphere, you can't be a profitable energy company in today's day and age.
Yeah, because people will vote with their dollars, and if they think that that's going to do a thing, then they're not going to buy the thing that's going to do the thing.
Yeah, so, and so, like, I think in this movie you don't see a political structure, because I think for the simplistic nature of this story, it had been kind of a redundancy.
Oh, I agree. You didn't need a mayor or anything like that.
It would have been an element that would have been, I think, cliche and unnecessary. Because it told the story of the corporate greed. He's the bad guy. He's the one that needs to be stopped. That's all you need, and that's what you got.
Yeah, it would have been the Michael Douglas of this movie.
Yeah. And I understand that this might be a stretch, because we're thinking Wall Street, we're thinking corporate greed, but I'm just thinking that this movie was like the precursor to 1930s Germany. This is near genocide that we're looking at in this movie, because it's not just greed and screw over the little guy. They were actually talking about building these big machines to pull them off the streets. And forgive the analogy, and I know this might get me in trouble, but, they were going to throw these robots into furnaces, that's not...
Oh, they were going to melt them down for scrap, all the outmodes.
That's skimming of a Holocaust issue. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but that's what I saw.
I don't think it was intentional to compare it to the Holocaust or to make a reference to the Holocaust.
Yeah, I don't think it was
definitely
comparison.
intentional to have that as a plot point, because then they had to work to save their friends and motivate everyone else to get involved so they could have the big battle at the end.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think on a fundamental level, that action of throwing robots into a furnace kind of touches our experience. And again, it's a skimming of the subject. It's not necessarily a reference to the Holocaust, but it just touches on that raw part of ourselves that just gives it enough of a memory to say, wow, that's bad.
But let's look at it from the point of view of a child, because it's an animated movie, and most people generally tend to relate animation with children. There is plenty of animation out in the universe that is not even remotely for children, but for the most part, if it's something released mainstream in the theaters, then it's usually geared towards kids, and that's what people are thinking. So, from a child's point of view, they're not thinking about the Holocaust. They're thinking about, oh my goodness, they're destroying all the people. You know, they don't have a name for it. They just think it's bad. You talk to any child, and they will tell you that putting all of the robots into the furnace is bad, and this bad guy needs to be stopped because they're doing a bad thing. You know, one of the things that they do in this movie is they show them picking up what's really just pieces parts and putting those in the furnace. It isn't until later on in the movie that you see Fender, Robin Williams' character, actually fighting to stay out of the furnace because he's been picked up by the sweepers. So they give it a personal face in much the same way we will provide a personal example of a thing that represents the whole to say this is bad. So nobody really gave two hoots about what they were throwing in the furnace until it was Fender going in there. And then after that, it was suddenly like, oh, wait, hey, we need to stop this so Fender doesn't get hurt. And then, oh, by the way, there are others that could get hurt too.
Yeah, well, it's also the implication. It's not so much as like, we got to defend Fender, but, you know, hey, Fender almost got in. That could have been any one of us, and the way things are going, it will be one of us type of thing.
Yeah, and that's how you make the motivation. That's how you motivate the rest of the society. That's how Piper got the rest of the robot masses to join her.
And begin the revolution, the resistance.
Yes, the resistance.
The rebellion.
Hashtag fake news.
No, but you know, the thing I'd like to touch on though, kind of backtrack a little bit. You know, you said that animation, whether it be movies or television, you know, any kind of cartoon, basically, you know, it's like they're marketed to kids. That, you know, that may be so, but you know, I'm very hard pressed to find any, and I gotta qualify this, of any animation of quality that are specifically made for kids.
Well, this movie had a lot of adult jokes in there, and I mentioned that earlier.
In the very beginning, when they said, I'm going to be a father, and they says, oh, I missed the delivery, and she says, well, but it's more fun making the baby as she's holding the box, you know, it's like, yeah, and you know, a kid would be like, oh yeah, building things is a lot of fun and everything, and mom and dad would be going,
yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember the night you were conceived, you know?
Yeah, I remember the night we made you.
Believe me, there were no instructions
or one of them
for that.
Nights. And then there's the part where the mom looks over and says, what is that? What is that part under the table? Oh, there's always extra parts. Like, oh, we did want a boy, didn't we? And then you've got the circumcision. Like, oh, you just pounded that thing in. Like, good, great, okay. Awkward.
But yeah, again, you know, and it's like, you can even find this in like almost every Disney film. You know, as cute and as funny as they could be, and the kids love them and everything, but yeah, there's so much adult humor in these things that it creates an abundance of YouTube videos of, oh yeah, if you really look at a Disney film this way, it's gonna ruin your childhood.
But it's not. It was fun when I was a kid, and now it's fun as an adult because I can look at it and see all of the hidden things. So it does not ruin my childhood.
No.
Nothing I've ever seen has ever ruined my childhood.
No, it's impossible to ruin mine.
I really hate that turn of phrase. But going back to the CEO thing, you know, the business thing, and not necessarily the corruption, but it really is a story of following your dreams. And it's a story of, really, you can fight City Hall, or at least a corporation.
I gotta say that the first part, I agree with you on that. It's, you know, it's one of those uplifting, follow your dreams. But I have to say the second part of that, it's like, it'd be nice if we could fight City Hall type of feeling. It's a fantasy. Because really, in reality, that doesn't usually work out that way. And it's like, it's just one of those, It's like every action movie where the little guy rises up and beats the bad guy. It's every. If I had one more example, this whole thing would sound a lot better.
Well, sometimes it's like a Hydra. You cut one head off and two more take its place.
Yeah, and that's kind of where the thing I'm going at is that in reality, it's like fighting a corporation is not as easy as taking down the one CEO. Like you said, it's a Hydra, and they just keep coming back at you.
Well, it's kind of like tilting at windmills. I mean, there's a reason that Don Quixote did it. Everybody's got their windmills to tilt at. But here's the thing, and this is the part that I like about the movie, is the positivity of if we all unite together for a common cause, we can accomplish a thing. And yes, you're right. At the end of the day, there might be another thing right behind it. But you know what? For that one moment, for that brief period, we took down one of the bad things. And yes, it's probably like a game of whack-a-mole. You hit one, another one pops up. But you know what? I got the satisfaction of taking down this one mole. And eventually, we'll whack all the moles and the game will be over. It won't always end up the exact way we want, but it is important, and I think this movie shows that. And again, I think we're going to a much deeper place than they really wanted us to in the movie. But it's important to fight those battles in the first place and not give up because there's another one on the other side. You fight the battle when you need to fight the battle, and then you learn the lesson from that battle and hope to not repeat it. And if you see it again, then you fight it then too. So it's a never-ending battle, but it's okay. I mean, we if good didn't fight evil, then evil would win.
Yes, but evil will always win because good is dumb. I don't really believe that, but that was
not what I was thinking, but I'm with you.
Always been waiting years to use that line in a conversation.
Nice. I was actually thinking, Edmund Burke, the only thing that necessary for evil to win is for good men to do nothing, or words to that effect.
Yes, I remember that phrase, but do you remember in Lord of War there was a summation of that phrase, though? It's like, evil prevails when good men do nothing. I think he said it's like, I think the phrase should just, that evil prevails.
Well, that's, again, goes back to the conversation that we have had repeatedly through a number of these podcasts. I'm a little too optimistic to let that be my worldview.
I get it. I mean, we're sci-fi fans. We always have an optimism, and we'll always continue to fight.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm looking forward to food replicators, and once you can make things with a magic box, you don't need money. Just everybody gets a magic box. You can use a big magic box to make smaller magic boxes. It's amazing.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and I think this is still staying relevant to the movie and subject at hand and everything, that, if you have something that works for everybody, are you going to be able to give it to everybody and make sure everybody is taken care of, or are there always going to be those profit-minded individuals that screw it up for the rest of us?
Oh, somebody's always going to want to be self-serving. But eventually, over time, you would winnow that down to such a small percentage of the population that it's, almost not even worth talking about.
I hope so. Again, that's our sci-fi optimism.
Yay! And robots are science fiction, so
yeah.
It's cool. Especially sentient robots that have tremendously large cities and apparently have desires to play with parts of other robots.
Desires to satiate pleasures,
Yeah, so not that it really bothered me. It was just one of those things that in the conversation I just thought about. What is the purpose of sexual attraction between robots if they're just going to make a new robot out of a kit?
That's a pretty good question. A knee-jerk reaction response to that is that maybe just the culturally, just the act of putting together a robot with your mate holds more significance than it would for us. Because obviously procreation for us is a physical act. It requires the stimulation of many nerve endings and pheromones,
etc. Skip a bit, brother. Skip a bit.
But robots don't have that. So maybe in their culture, just the very act of putting something together holds a cultural significance.
I'm sure that as the robots evolved over time, when the first finned robot climbed out of the oil pit, and walked upon the land and made another robot. Yeah, I've always wondered about the evolution of synthetic life forms. I mean, how that happened, but that's not a conversation I want to get into.
Yeah, I've had that idea rolling in my head, and I have my ideas of how it happened, and it's kind of a melding of many different sci-fi stories that makes an evolution. So maybe, for another time.
All right. I will say that the Robot City, it had the most complicated mass transit system I've ever seen in my entire life. It was a great big traveling ball mousetrap game, if you recall that board game from the 70s and 80s.
Even that game, this whole thing was just a huge Rube Goldberg.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it's like, I think whoever made this movie, the production design, was a fan of the Rube Goldberg, because it seemed like almost everything that was done here was just this long, complicated process of pull this lever, hit this spring, ball flows into here, hits this switch, everything goes, and
It was fun, though. I mean, it gave the kids something to watch.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's the only reason the Rube Goldberg really exists, is because they're fun to watch. So whoever made this movie had to have been a fan. It'd be interesting to find out if he was, or if it was just something that said, "Oh, this will look neat. The kids will love it."
Nice. I liked it. I mean, I'm an adult and I thought it was cool. I thought it was overly complicated. And how do they pay for that? I mean, I didn't see him put any money in there. Who's paying for all the mass transit? Does it just exist because
socialism? It's free mass transit.
Yay. And the other question is, are robots controlling that, and is that their job, and do they get to go home at the end of the night? I mean, how do robots work other robots? How does that work?
Again, this is one of those things where it's like, why do robots even need homes if they technically can work all day, all night? They don't get tired.
Anthropomorphic.
Anthropomorphized.
I can't say the word. Yes, there we go. You got to make them relatable as beings. I get that. Right, that was fun.
Then in that case, yeah, there probably were some technicians somewhere in the underbelly of the city making sure the timing was. Because, I mean, that one part of the whole transit thing where they went through the wheels and the timing was perfect when they went through the holes. And I'm just thinking, wow, if those things are off by just 1 second, that's it. Your trip is over.
And you're done. I wonder if they tried that with organics first. I mean, maybe they had organic life on that planet, and, that was what they were using as labor beneath the city.
It's like we are slaves to our robot overlords.
Yeah. Well, it's like driving around in the cars with the magnets on them when they had the big chase.
Uh-huh.
Well, why weren't those robots? Why didn't they just make robot magnets? Why do they have to drive them?
Bringing up those things, though, you kind of bring up another question, is like, how are these robots powered, and how are they thinking if they're unaffected by magnets?
They have a soul?
Okay. Duh.
I was thinking the same thing, going, didn't his memory just get erased?
I was saying, he got hit by a powerful magnet that it left residual magnetism to him, which, an amusing scene with all the dust, and he made all the different faces and the different hairstyles.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. That was a great tip of the hat to the old, I'm sure you had them when you were a kid, the plastic things with the magnet, and you draw on the face, and
give him a beard,
and all the
magnets,
all iron fight.
Yeah.
I could never do anything good with that. It always looked silly.
But yeah, I'm just like looking. It's like, yeah, he's magnetized. How is he still talking?
Well, he's a robot, so.
I mean, that to me, that's a robotic equivalent of having a massive stroke. It's like...
Or when Big Weld got clunked on the head by Ratchet, and he reverted to an older program or something. On an interesting note, on IMDb, they have some of the trivia and stuff, and they talked about the magnet and the making of the faces, and they specifically acknowledged that is a thing they did on purpose just to tip the hat, which, I mean, if you knew of it, it wasn't really that big of a deal. But going back to Big Weld getting clunked on the head, one of the songs that he sings while
having his stroke.
Yes, while having his robot stroke, is actually the first song ever vocalized by a computer.
Yes, the Daisy song, which is featured in 2 other pop culture sci-fi references. 2001, Hal sings it as he's being slowly I wouldn't say deprogrammed, but, shut down.
I would say deconstructed, but that's not right. Yeah.
But there's a word.
Shut down, I think, when he's being powered down.
There's a word for it, and I can't remember it, so hopefully somebody in the feedback calls me an idiot and says, it's this, dummy. It's like, oh, thank you.
I think that they would probably leave the dummy part out, or they would just say...
Oh, this is the internet, Brian.
Yeah, the word you're looking for is X. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting piece of trivia because they're robots and because it was the first computer-voiced song. I thought that was a neat piece of trivia. So.
Oh yeah, and the other reference I was going to bring up is that Bender sings it in an episode of Futurama when he's dating the Planet Express ship. I think he's singing it. He's not getting shut down, but he's singing it to her as kind of like a romantic thing when he was dating her. It's kind of funny, nice little continuing reference in sci-fi.
And stuff like that is cool, especially when you know about it.
Oh yeah.
But yeah,
little bits of,
like
nerdism that seep in, and that hardcore nerds like us can really go. It's like, hey,
Yeah, and most people are like, oh, he was singing the song, cool, but when you know what it's from, it makes it even more interesting.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's the thing about some of these jokes is they're funny on their face, but if you know where it comes from, it makes it even funnier. So sometimes you laugh not to scale.
Yeah.
With everybody, you're laughing like a hyena, and somebody else is chuckling. You're like, oh, because that was this and this was that, and it was funny. Sorry, that goes on a lot in my life. Or I laugh at my own internal jokes. That's good too.
Oh yeah. My family. I shouldn't say my family because my daughter's not old enough to really look at me that weirdly. But my wife looks at me weirdly a lot. It's like, what are you laughing at? What is this? Okay, and then you explain it to her, and she's still like, yeah, whatever.
I get that sometimes from my wife as well, and my teenage daughters will look at me and go, Dad, like, what? Like, I got dad jokes. What do you want?
That shit is funny.
But, yeah, so, speaking of funny, again, I had mentioned earlier that I had forgotten that Robin Williams was in this, and I gotta say, I can think of 3, maybe 4 animated movies that Robin Williams has been in off the top of my head. Aladdin, obviously, Happy Feet, Fern Gully, and this. And the way that man's brain moves, a lot of the lines that he has are ad-libbed, and they go through a number of different takes. I was reading on the internet that there's a scene in there where they ended up going with a Scottish accent, and it's in right before the great big battle scene.
Yeah.
And they did multiple takes, and in every take he was doing a different exaggerated accent. And I will say that watching Robin Williams when I was a kid gave me a lot of the impetus for the accents that I do for, when I want to do an accent, like the overblown Scottish, or if you remember from The Birdcage, he does an accent that's very much like Agador, Agador Spartacus. Are you afraid of my guatemalanness, my heat? But a lot of the accents that I used to do with rubber ducks when the kids were little, and we would have to give them a bath. They had a vast armada of rubber ducks, and each one of them had its own accent and its own backstory. So I would do a Russian duck, and he was once a hero of Soviet Union. He had saved Boris Yeltsin. Maybe you remember this name, maybe not, I don't know. But he come to America to live a different life. And I would do, it's Scottish, and that sort of thing. So Robin Williams gave me a lot of that inspiration, and that's where I got most of my accents from. So when he's in animated movies, these are the only movies that can keep up with him, as opposed to a scripted movie where he's got to slow down and actually, speak.
It's like the Bruce Lee of comedy. Everything has to slow down just so we can catch him on film.
Yeah, and he had a couple of good jokes in there. Speaking of Aladdin, one of the things about this movie, and tell me if I'm wrong, or tell me if you saw it, it drew a lot of its points, its informative, moral-based points from a lot of other movies, almost in a transference kind of way, word for word. So in Aladdin, we were talking about that earlier, the suitor from the Sultan, or for the Sultan's daughter, for Jasmine, looks at him and says, "You're a street rat. You'll always be a street rat." Well, there's a line in this movie that says, "You're a hand-me-down son of a dishwasher, and that's all you'll ever be." It's almost the same line, really. There's a lot of the points are culled from other movies.
Yeah, I don't know if that one can be called a direct pull or any kind of relationship, in the sense that, that kind of put down is pretty common. It's pretty ubiquitous, and especially like American society in the class. If I dare say the word class warfare, because I can't think of another word for it, but you're a low rent, or you're a poor dirty person, and that's all you're ever gonna be. That's all that kind of put down has been
Yeah, your mother was poor,
Father.
your father was poor, your grandparents were poor, you're just going to be poor.
You were a dung shoveler, and that's it.
But there's also a certain... He's using it as an insult, but you can use it as a point of pride. And you can look in West Virginia, for example, and I use this example all the time. When young men, particularly, are growing up in West Virginia in certain areas, they say, my granddaddy was a coal miner, my daddy was a coal miner, and I'm going to be a coal miner. That's not an insult. That's a point of pride. Mm-hmm. Like, we're 5 generations of coal miners. Military families, you see the same thing. Like, oh, my great-granddaddy was in the Civil War, my granddaddy was in World War One.
Every member of his family had fought and died in every American war.
Yeah, exactly. Lieutenant Dan, you got magic legs. But it's interesting that it's in this, and again, we're going probably deeper than they wanted us to about one particular line in the movie.
That's a talent of ours, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. But it goes to identity, and that's a thing that I have spent a lot of time discussing lately with another friend of mine, is you can either use your identity to tear yourself down and say, and you've said it before, I'm just a X, in your use of the word just.
Actually, I've been the advocate of not using the word just.
Well, that's what I'm saying, that in that sense. But I'm just a housewife. People can say, well, I'm just a housewife, I can't do it. And they'll use that to define their identity as limiting. But then there are some housewives that will say, I'm a housewife, I can do anything. And they'll use it as an empowering identity.
And I think that's the thing, is like, identity, I feel, should always be a foundation, and what you do with that foundation is up to you, but it should always be firm, whether or not you want to say that a coal miner is a point of pride. It's like, my ancestry going back 100 years have been coal miners, and that's what I'm going to be, and I'm going to be proud about it. Then that's your foundation, that's who you are, and that's the foundation you're going to live on. But if you want to say I can be something more, then it's a foundation that you build upon. It should never. That's the thing. That's hopefully what I can instill in my daughter, is that be who you are, be proud of it, be strong, and you go from there. Because if your personality's weak, if your identity's weak, then where are you going to start from?
Well, look at Jean-Luc Picard. There was a Picard on every manned space mission since the first manned mission to Mars. Point of pride. It was part of his identity. A Picard must go out into space and explore. It's what we do. So, anyway, I thought that was interesting. There's nothing wrong with being a hand-me-down son of a dishwasher unless your hand-me-downs are from your female cousin and that's your senior yearbook picture.
Yeah, awkward there. It's like... But see, again, that's a movie that touched on a subject that wasn't quite in the headlines then, but is now. The whole thing about gender identity and everything. It's like, again, probably didn't want us to dig that deep, but hey, here we go.
But here we are looking at gender identity of a robot that had to wear his female cousin's clothes.
Yeah. Again, robots that have gender. But okay. We'll go with it. Again, we're sci-fi fans. We'll roll with it because that's what we do.
Again, going back to what we talked about in the original, or in the first part of the podcast, when they were putting the baby together, why is there a penis part? Why do you even need a penis part? You're just going to build a robot.
Yeah, I would think, though, that transgender robots would be a lot easier. In fact, you can probably do that at home.
Or non-gendered robots. It's not even transgender, just non-gender. Like, you have a program, I suppose. You're programmed as liking other robots. It wouldn't even matter. You're just, I suppose they don't have a problem with same-gender robot relationships because they're just going to order a box.
Yeah, probably not, I gotta say, the process of gender alteration, or gender reassignment, I should say, was a lot easier in this movie than it is portrayed in Futurama. Because the scene with Robin Williams, with Fender, his torso was ripped in half in his escape attempt, and he grabbed the first one that was on the conveyor belt, and it was a feminine pair of legs. And next thing you know, he's almost like completely female. It's like he just put on the lower part that happened to have a dress and feminine looking legs, but then he had like little metal shavings that came down to make him look like it was hair. He started acting in a very stereotypical, if not unflattering, feminine manner.
But Robin Williams Fender in Robots got the, I can't even think of the name, like the Copacabana dancer. He got the skirt bottom when he was in the thing, and he started, I want to dance.
Yeah, so I mean, it kind of makes you wonder where...
Changed his whole outlook.
Yeah, where is personality stored in robots? Is it in the lower part?
Well, I wonder if it's all part of a cumulative program of personality part in each appendage that sort of goes to the whole. Feeds sort of a master processing.
Well, that
again, we are really digging on this movie.
That makes a lot more sense. Because I mean, in Futurama,
and how did it evolve?
How did it evolve? I was gonna say in Futurama, they really went into detail when Bender, to compete in the all-female Olympic team, he reassigned his gender. And I just remember one of the part was the oil transfusion from male oil to fem's oil.
Nice.
And then they snipped his antenna, which
oh, hey.
Which I don't know. In the beginning, in the first season of Futurama, that really wasn't considered a sexual organ for robots, but later on it became as such.
Yeah, never really understood that. I did like some of the little details that they had. Speaking of gendered robots, when Big Weld is coming back into the corporate offices and he's rolling through the open area, and there's a male robot coming out of the restroom, and it had, like a 3-pronged plug, and then he happened to step to the right to avoid him and got knocked into the door with the receptacle. I was like, okay, nice touch. That's funny. There were a lot of interesting little hidden jokes. Not really hidden, but like details. Mm-hmm. Like the wind-up pigeons.
Yeah.
Those were kind of cool. Like, what are you feeding the wind-up pigeons? Nuts and bolts. All right, yeah. Cool. And then the wind-up car. That was kind of cool.
What year was Cars made? Because a lot of the jokes made me really think of Cars. Because again, the wind-up pigeons, because they're robots, and then you had the little Volkswagen Beetle bugs in Cars. It was kind of very reminiscent of the sight gags.
Cars came out in 2001.
Okay, so you could make the argument this might have been a ripoff, but
I think a lot of these things, a lot of this movie was culled from other things. Oh, I'm sorry, Cars came out in 2006. My bad.
Oh, so it came after. So Cars ripped them off.
Yeah. Sure.
So it's the other way around.
Well, I think Cars did it better.
Improved upon it, I guess you can say, but it's still kind of a bit of a ripoff.
But I do want to talk about the voice talents for just a minute.
Yeah, go for it.
And some of the like Mel Brooks was great in this movie. It was a lot of fun. I love Mel Brooks movies. Well, most of them: Men in Tights, Blazing Saddles, History of the World Part 1. The ones you classically think of Mel Brooks in. There are others, but those are the ones that initially came to mind. Ewan Macgregor was hot off of Star Wars, the prequels fame, so he got put into this. But when I was watching the trailer, they were really making a big deal about Robin Williams. Jennifer Coolidge, I hear her voice, and she is immediately identifiable, but I can never remember her name. She was in Legally Blonde, but she has a very distinct voice that is easily identifiable, even if I can never remember her name.
Yeah, I'd say I don't think I have that ability, because I think if I did not recognize which character was she.
She was Aunt Fanny. She was also Stifler's mom.
Yeah, she plays the creepy older lady who's just borderline creepy, kind of.
No, she plays the one that farts.
Yeah, no. I'm talking about the actress herself, Jennifer Coolidge.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because she's kind of like that typecast of the older. Because she's also in. What's that TV show with the two waitresses?
Two Broke Girls?
Yeah. Isn't she in that as well?
Yeah, she plays a lot of the same movie, or a lot of the same character. She is typecast.
Yeah.
Which is fine, she does it well.
When I first saw her, though, I initially thought that she was Karen Black, who most recently was in a couple Rob Zombie movies. Actually, one The House of a Thousand Corpses. She was Mother Firefly. And she kind of has the same look as, the older lady who's a little bit more forward and sexual to people for their comfort.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Jennifer Coolidge kind of has that look, and that's what she's typecast in. That's what I thought.
Yeah, and again, she, like I said, she does it well, so no harm there. Drew Carey was in this. He was the
mention.
Yeah, and I don't recognize his voice. I know he's hosting Price is Right now. He doesn't necessarily have a voice that I identify easily in a crowd.
I initially thought that the robot that had his voice was Norm Macdonald, who has a very similar voice, very very dry kind of.
Yeah, same sort of timbre and tone.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. But yeah, when I saw the IMDb, it's like, oh, it was Drew Carey, it wasn't Norm Macdonald. But...
Okay. James Earl Jones.
Yeah,
I mean, that was nice.
The one.
The force is strong with this one.
The one scene.
Yeah. This movie does speak well of socialized medicine.
Yeah.
When Rodney is fixing all of the other robots. That was nice. And it's not even socialized medicine. It's really just, wouldn't it be nice if we all just helped each other?
That would be
Wouldn't
nice.
that be nice?
And that's why I kind of, again, consider this a bit of a fantasy piece, because we're just not there yet, and I don't think we're getting there anytime soon.
Well, they're robots, so...
They're better than us.
They're better than us. They're 3 laws safe. Oh, wait, no, wrong movie. My bad.
Yes.
That was
Well,
iRobots.
that's
No singular iRobot. Anyway.
Isaac Asimov's laws. But there's no humans in this
Yep,
movie for
yep.
them to apply to.
Exactly, so it's all good. And obviously they can hurt other robots. I gotta say, I don't know that Ratchet was that good of a villain. He really was, mom's little boy.
Not a standout when it comes to villains in movies.
Yeah, this is not a thing that... And in fact, I'll be honest, when I watched this, I knew about Mom being in the background and everything, but I kind of forgot some of the little details. I was like, oh, yeah, this part. So this movie is not one of the most memorable animated movies that I've ever seen.
Yeah, like I said, it's fun. It's still... You can still laugh a little bit at the jokes if you have a few years in between viewings.
I think that's the secret to this one, is you can't watch it. This isn't a... Let's watch it every year or every couple of months. This is like, once every 4 or 5 years, you give it a watch and go, I remember this. This was amusing.
Exactly.
The songs were fun. I mean, the soundtrack was interesting.
That was something I bring upon you. You said the soundtrack. A lot of pop culture references. A lot of the music of that time. God, who sang it? The Right There song. It's like, that's an oldie that I haven't heard in a long time. Chingy, I think it was
Yeah, it was a little bit of
Chingy
a
was the
throwback.
artist who originally sang that, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember that song. That was popular during the time. There's a few other Everybody Dance Now at the big party scene.
Oh,
yeah,
at the very end, yeah.
Still a big hit in gay clubs, but again, it's an older piece that not a lot of people would remember if they viewed it. What was that music? Some people would be like, wow, that music was cool. What's it from? And other people would be like, I remember that. And the others would be like, yeah, well, I don't know it.
I liked the Fender got to get his dance on with his little Conchita Alonso Ramirez Gonzalez Smith dress on with his girly bottom half. So, did you have any final thoughts or anything else you wanted to talk about?
It's unfortunate podcast-wise that we don't have more to talk about, because this movie, I hesitate to say, I don't want to call it a throwaway movie, but it's just one of those, kind of, it's there, it's fun once in a while type of movies, but it really didn't have a hook for me. It didn't really require me to say, I gotta have that movie.
Well, obviously not, because you don't have it on your shelf.
Yeah, I don't, and it's not to say that it's a bad movie. It's just, my tastes didn't adhere to it.
Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot to add. I mean, I think we went way deeper into some topics than I really thought we could or would. I think that this movie is a formulaic movie that is just grab this story and plug in, new characters and change the dialogue. But that's okay. Yeah. It was fun. It definitely wasn't one of the worst animated movies I've ever seen. It was just fun.
No, absolutely not. I would definitely say that it was nowhere near the absolute worst. But, I think I've said this before in other podcasts. We can talk about movies. We can put them in the Library of Congress as important pieces of art and examples of our culture. But ultimately, bare bones, these are instruments for studios to turn a buck. And I think this one, that's it. Like you said, it's formulaic. They put something together. It entertained enough people to go to the movies, to go buy a ticket, buy some popcorn and a soda or whatever else they wanted to buy, sit in the theater for an hour and a half, watch the movie, and movie studios to say, wow, this actually made money.
Yeah, and it kept him in business, making more movies. So it did what it was supposed to do. I do like animated movies when they have a theme that's pretty relatable and it's actually positive. There's no real way that you can screw up, see a need, fill a need. I'm always a huge fan of anything that inspires creativity in children, so I think that was great. I did like Wonderbot, even though it never said anything, how it kept exploding and getting all nervous and everything. It was a nice touch.
What's the name of that robot in Futurama? Exploding Bill or something, whatever his name is. What?
Yeah, it's your job to blow up.
Yeah, and I hope sometime in the near future when little Tessie here, who I'm sure the listeners can hear in the background, when she's old enough and she sits down, she's not quite the age yet where she sits down and watches a movie, but when she gets there, definitely I'll show this to her. Like I said, the imagery is fun.
Yeah.
So that's all I've got to say about that.
All right, so sort of wrapped up our final thoughts. Where does this belong on your shelf? If you owned it, where would you put it on your shelf?
Yeah, if the day ever comes where I actually own it because Tesla wants me to buy it for her, then it'll go in general population. I mean, it's definitely the middle of the bell curve.
Yeah, fair enough. On a 1 to 5 shelf system, I would put this right smack in the middle of shelf 3. It's a perfectly serviceable movie. I own it because it was fun. I don't think I've watched it in 7 or 8 years. So, but it's still a decent movie. Yeah, if I could own every movie that I wanted with no concern for price, I would put it on the 3rd shelf. So,
all right, good to go.
All right. Listeners, we want to hear what you think, so leave us some feedback on our Facebook page. Just search for We'll Review It, Our Shelves on Facebook, and it'll pop right up. And while you're there, click like on the page so that we can see all of our fans. We do have currently 33 likes, which is awesome. So keep downloading. We appreciate that. Share it with your friends. Leave us a review on the iTunes. Email us at wrios2016mr@gmail.com. And you can also leave comments on the Podbean page, which is where we had our listener feedback from earlier. And yeah, I think that's everything. So with that, I think it is now time to press the random magic movie generator button. Find out what we're doing next time.
Dan's pick.
Oop, Dan's pick. What do you think?
I mean, we just did something that was kind of comedic and everything, but we've also shown a talent for digging deeper than anything. And I think kind of staying with comedies, and we talked about Mel Brooks in this movie. Let's do Blazing Saddles. How's that sound?
That sounds like a lot of fun. This is going to be a loaded conversation.
Yeah, I was about to say, in today's atmosphere.
What are you doing? I'm tap dancing.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let me go get the sheriff and. All right, so Blazing Saddles. That's going to be an interesting conversation. So join us in 2 weeks as we discuss Mel Brooks's Blazing Saddles. Dan, do you have an outro for us this week?
I don't know. There used to be a part where a hammer came up. Oh, look, they brought it back.
All right, thanks everyone. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to share us.